Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart through the heavy wooden doors of the Whitmore mansion. The wheels squeaked softly against the marble floor as she entered the grand living room. It was Tuesday evening, and she knew the routine by heart. Every Tuesday at 6 o'clock, she would clean this beautiful house while the Whitmore family hosted their dinner parties. The living room was huge, with tall ceilings and expensive furniture everywhere. Crystal chandeliers hung from above, casting warm light on the polished surfaces. But what always caught Maria's attention was the grand piano in the corner. It was black and shiny, standing like a proud giant in the middle of the room. Maria had been working for the Whitmore family for 3 years now. She cleaned their house twice a week and took care of their laundry. The work was hard, but she needed the money. Her husband worked in construction, and they had 2 young children to feed. The Whitmore family paid her well, so she never complained about the long hours or the heavy work. Tonight was different, though. As Maria dusted the piano, she could not help but stop and look at the beautiful instrument. The keys were perfect, each one clean and ready to make music. She had always loved pianos ever since she was a little girl. Her fingers moved slowly toward the keys, almost touching them. She remembered her childhood in her home country, where she had learned to play piano. Her teacher was an old woman who lived next door. Every afternoon after school, Maria would go to her house and practice for hours. She loved the way the music flowed from her fingers, the way each note connected to the next one, but that was long ago in a different life. Now she was in America, working as a housekeeper, trying to build a better future for her family. She had not touched a piano in years. Not since she left her old life behind. As she dusted around the piano, Maria could hear voices from the dining room. The Whitmore family was having their usual Tuesday dinner party. She knew all the guests by now, even though they rarely spoke to her. They were rich people, business owners, doctors, and lawyers. They came every week to eat expensive food and talk about important things. The Whitmore family had 4 members. Mr. Whitmore was a successful businessman who owned several companies. Mrs. Whitmore was a socialite who spent her time organizing charity events and shopping. They had 2 adult children, Bradley and Sarah, who were both in their 20s but still lived at home. Bradley was the worst of all. He was 25 years old but acted like a spoiled teenager. He had never worked a real job in his life. His parents gave him everything he wanted, and he spent his days playing video games or hanging out with his rich friends. He was rude to Maria and treated her like she was invisible. Sarah was a little better, but not much. She was 23 and studied art at an expensive college. She sometimes said hello to Maria, but she never really paid attention to her. Both children had grown up with servants and housekeepers, so they did not know how to treat working people with respect. Maria continued cleaning, moving from room to room. She could hear laughter and conversation from the dining room. The guests were talking about their businesses, their vacations, and their expensive purchases. They lived in a world that Maria could only imagine. As she worked, Maria thought about her own children. Her daughter was 8 years old and loved to draw. Her son was 6 and dreamed of becoming a soccer player. They were both good students, and Maria worked hard to make sure they had everything they needed for school. Sometimes Maria felt tired and discouraged. She missed her old life, where she had been a teacher and people respected her. In her home country, she had taught piano to young students. She had her own small music school and felt proud of her work. But economic problems forced her family to leave everything behind and start over in America. The work was honest, and she was grateful for it. But sometimes she wondered if her children would understand why she had to clean other people's houses. She hoped they would see that she was doing it for them, to give them opportunities she never had. As Maria finished dusting the living room, she heard Bradley's voice getting louder. He was talking to his friends about something funny that happened. At work, Maria did not pay much attention to their conversations, but tonight something was different. Bradley seemed excited about something. She continued working, wiping down the tables and organizing the magazines. The piano stood in the corner, silent and beautiful. Maria found herself looking at it again. She wondered what it would sound like, what songs it could play. Her fingers remembered the feeling of touching piano keys, the smooth texture and the way they moved when pressed. Maria had learned to be invisible in this house. She did her work quietly and efficiently, never bothering the family or their guests. She knew they preferred it that way. Rich people did not like to be reminded that poor people existed. They wanted their houses to be clean and organized, but they did not want to see the person who made it happen. But tonight, as she cleaned, around the piano, Maria felt something different. Maybe it was the way the light hit the keys, or maybe it was the sound of laughter from the dining room. She felt a strange pull toward the instrument. As if it was calling to her, she looked around to make sure no one was watching, then slowly reached out and touched one key. It made a soft, beautiful sound that seemed to fill the room. For just a moment, Maria forgot where she was. She forgot about her cleaning cart and her rubber gloves. She remembered who she used to be, but then she heard footsteps in the hallway. Maria quickly pulled her hand away and went back to dusting. She could not afford to lose this job. Her family needed the money, and the Whitmore family expected her to be professional at all times. Unknown to Maria, Bradley had been watching from the doorway. He had seen her touch the piano key, and a slow smile spread across his face. He had an idea, and he knew his friends would love it. This was going to be the most entertaining dinner party they had ever had. Bradley walked back to the dining room with excitement in his eyes. His friends were sitting around the large wooden table, drinking wine and eating the expensive meal that Maria had helped prepare earlier. The conversation was loud and cheerful, filled with stories about their recent purchases and weekend plans. "You guys will not believe what I just saw," Bradley said as he sat down in his chair. His voice was filled with the kind of mischief that his friends knew well. They had grown up together, all from wealthy families, and they shared the same sense of humor about people who were different from them. "What happened?" asked Jessica, a blonde woman who worked at her father's law firm. She was always ready for gossip or entertainment, especially if it involved making fun of someone else. "I just caught our housekeeper touching the piano," Bradley said with a grin. "She was actually trying to play it. Can you believe that? I think she thinks she can make music." The table erupted in laughter. The idea of Maria, their quiet housekeeper, trying to play their expensive piano seemed absolutely ridiculous to them. They had never thought of her as anything more than the woman who cleaned their house and washed their dishes. "Oh my God, that's hilarious," said Marcus, Bradley's best friend since childhood. "Does she even know what a piano is?" "I bet she's never seen one before working here." "We should totally make her play for us," suggested Amanda, Sarah's college friend. "It would be so funny to watch her try to figure out how it works." Bradley's eyes lit up with excitement. This was exactly the kind of idea he loved. He enjoyed pranks and jokes, especially when they involved people who worked for his family. In his mind, it was all harmless fun, and he never thought about how his actions might hurt others. "That's perfect," Bradley said, clapping his hands. "Together, we can invite her to perform for us like she's some kind of concert pianist. The look on her face will be priceless." Mrs. Whitmore looked uncomfortable with the idea. She was not always kind to the help, but she did not like the idea of publicly embarrassing Maria. "Bradley, I don't think that's very nice," she said quietly. "Oh, come on, Mom," Bradley replied. "It's just a joke. She'd probably find it funny, too. Besides, she was the one touching our piano without permission." Mr. Whitmore said nothing. He was reading something on his phone and not really paying attention to the conversation. He had learned long ago to let his wife handle the household staff, and he did not want to get involved in his son's games. Sarah also looked uncertain. She was younger than Bradley, but sometimes showed more maturity. "Maybe we should just leave her alone," she suggested. "She's working, and we're interrupting her." But Bradley's friends were already excited about the idea. They started planning how to make the invitation, what they would say to Maria, and how they would record the whole thing on their phones. The idea of watching their housekeeper struggle with something she clearly could not do seemed like the perfect entertainment for their boring Tuesday evening. "I'll go get her," Bradley announced, standing up from the table. "This is going to be so good." Meanwhile, Maria was in the kitchen, washing the dishes from dinner preparation. She could hear the laughter from the dining room, but she did not pay much attention to it. Rich people always seem to find something to laugh about, and she had learned not to wonder what they found so funny. She was thinking about her children, who were probably doing their homework at home. Her husband would be helping them with their math problems, and later they would all watch television together. It was a simple life, but it was their life. And Maria was proud of the family they had built together. As she scrubbed a particularly stubborn pot, Maria heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to see Bradley standing in the doorway, wearing his usual smirk. He was dressed in an expensive suit and looked like he had been drinking wine all evening. "Maria," Bradley said, in a voice that was too friendly, too polite. Maria had worked for the family long enough to know that this tone meant trouble. "We would love for you to join us in the living room." Maria dried her hands on her apron and looked at Bradley with confusion. In 3 years of working for the Whitmore family, she had never been invited to join them during their dinner parties. She was supposed to stay in the kitchen or clean the other rooms while they entertained their guests. "Is there something wrong, Mr. Bradley?" Maria asked. "Do you need me to clean something in the living room?" "No, no," Bradley said, waving his hand dismissively. "We want you to do something special for us. Would you honor us by playing something on the piano?" Maria felt her heart skip a beat. The piano? Why would they want her to play the piano? She looked at Bradley's face and saw something that made her uncomfortable. His smile was too wide, too eager, and his eyes had a strange look in them. "I don't think that's appropriate, Mr. Bradley," Maria said quietly. "I'm here to work, not to play music." "Oh, come on," Bradley insisted, his voice becoming more persuasive. "Everyone wants to hear you play. We saw you touching the piano earlier, so we know you're interested in music. This is your chance to show us what you can do." Maria felt trapped. She could not refuse a direct request from her employer's son, but she also knew that this was not a real invitation. Something about Bradley's manner told her that this was some kind of joke, and she would be the target of it. "I really don't think I should," Maria tried again. "I have work to finish, and I don't want to interrupt your dinner party." But Bradley was not taking no for an answer. "Maria, we insist. Everyone is waiting for you in the living room. Don't keep our guests waiting." Maria looked down at her hands, still wet from washing dishes. She was wearing her old work clothes, and her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. She did not look like someone who should be performing for wealthy guests at a dinner party, but she also knew that she could not say no. Bradley was her employer's son, and if she refused his request, she might lose her job. Her family needed this income, and she could not risk making the Whitmore family angry. "Okay," Maria said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll come to the living room." Bradley's smile grew even wider. "Excellent. This is going to be so much fun." As Maria slowly removed her apron and followed Bradley toward the living room, she felt a sense of dread growing in her stomach. She knew that whatever was waiting for her would not be pleasant, but she had no choice but to face it. The laughter from the dining room grew louder as they walked, and Maria realized that she was walking into a trap that had been set just for her. Maria followed Bradley into the living room, her heart beating fast in her chest. The moment she stepped through the doorway, she saw all the guests looking at her with smiles that did not reach their eyes. They were sitting and standing around the room, wine glasses in their hands, phones already out and ready to record whatever was about to happen. The beautiful living room suddenly felt different. The warm lighting that had seemed so welcoming when she cleaned here now felt harsh and bright. The expensive furniture and decorations that she had always admired now seemed to be watching her, judging her. The grand piano in the corner looked bigger than ever, like a black mountain she would have to climb. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bradley announced in a loud voice, "I present to you our very talented housekeeper, Maria Santos. She's going to play piano for us tonight." Some of the guests clapped politely, but Maria could see the amusement in their faces. They were not clapping because they were excited to hear music. They were clapping because they thought they were about to see something funny. something that would give them a good story to tell their other rich friends later. Maria stood frozen in the doorway, looking at all the faces staring back at her. She recognized most of them from her 3 years of working here. There was Dr. Peterson, who never said hello when she cleaned his coat. There was Mrs. Hamilton, who always left her jewelry scattered around for Maria to put away. There was Mr. Chun, who acted like Maria was invisible whenever he visited. All of these people had seen her clean their messes, wash their dishes, and organize their belongings. But they had never really seen her as a person. To them, she was just part of the furniture, someone who made their lives easier but who did not really matter. "Go ahead, Maria," Bradley said, gesturing toward the piano. "We're all waiting to hear what you can do." Maria's hands were shaking as she walked slowly toward the piano. She could feel every eye in the room following her movements. She heard someone whisper something to their friend, followed by quiet laughter. Another person was adjusting their phone to get a better angle for recording. The piano bench looked so small and delicate compared to the heavy chairs she was used to sitting on during her breaks. Maria had always been careful around the expensive furniture in this house, afraid that she might break something and have to pay for it. Now she was supposed to sit at their most precious possession and pretend to play music. As she approached the piano, Maria thought about her children at home. They were probably getting ready for bed now, brushing their teeth and putting on their pajamas. Her husband would be reading them a bedtime story, just like he did every night. They had no idea that their mother was standing in a room full of strangers who wanted to laugh at her. Maria reached the piano and stood behind the bench for a moment. The keys looked perfect and clean, just like always. She had dusted them hundreds of times, but she had never imagined she would be sitting here, expected to play them while people watched and recorded her. She could hear more whispers now. Someone said something about how this was going to be hilarious. Another person wondered if she even knew which keys to press. A third voice asked if anyone had ever heard her hum or sing while she worked. Maria slowly sat down on the bench, adjusting her position carefully. The bench was the right height, and her feet could reach the pedals easily. For just a moment, she forgot about the people watching her and remembered what it felt like to sit at a piano. "Anytime you're ready," Bradley said from behind her. His voice was full of fake encouragement, the kind of tone adults used when they talked to small children about things they could not really do. Maria placed her hands on her lap and closed her eyes. She could feel the weight of everyone's attention on her shoulders. She knew they expected her to fumble around, to press random keys and make ugly sounds. They wanted her to be embarrassed, to prove that she was just a cleaning lady who did not belong in their world. But as she sat there with her eyes closed, Maria remembered something else. She remembered being 7 years old, sitting at her neighbor's old piano for the first time. She remembered how scared she had been then too, with her teacher watching and waiting. She remembered how the fear had disappeared the moment she touched the keys and heard the beautiful sound they made. Maria opened her eyes and looked down at the piano keys. They were the same keys she had been looking at for 3 years, but now they seemed different. They were not just something to dust and clean. They were tools for making music, just like the piano she had learned on as a child. She lifted her hands and placed them gently on the keys. The position felt natural, like coming home after a long journey. Her fingers remembered exactly where to go, even after all these years. It was like riding a bicycle or speaking her native language. Some things never left you, no matter how long you went without using them. The room became completely quiet. Even the whispers stopped. Everyone was watching Maria's hands, waiting to see what would happen next. Some people had their phones ready to record the moment when she would make a mistake. Others were already smiling, expecting to hear terrible sounds. Maria took a deep breath and pressed down on one key. The note that came out was clear and beautiful. It was not a mistake or an accident. It was a perfectly controlled, purposeful sound that filled the entire room with its richness and warmth. The effect was immediate. The smiles on people's faces began to fade. The phones that had been held up to record her failure were slowly lowered. The whispers and quiet laughter stopped completely. In that one moment, with that one perfect note, everything changed. Maria felt the change too. As the sound of that first note faded away, she felt something awakening inside her. It was like a door opening after being locked for years. Her fingers moved to the next keys, and she began to play the opening notes of a piece she had learned long ago. In a different life, in a different world, the guests stood frozen as the music began to flow from Maria's hands. This was not what they had expected. This was not the embarrassing performance they had been waiting to see. This was something else entirely, something that made them question everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman who cleaned their house. Maria's fingers moved across the keys like they belonged there. The music that flowed from the piano was not the clumsy sounds the guests had expected. It was beautiful, complex, and filled with emotion. Each note connected to the next one perfectly, creating a melody that seemed to wrap around everyone in the room. The piece she was playing was Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, one of the most difficult pieces any pianist could attempt. It required years of training and practice to play correctly. Yet Maria's hands moved with confidence and grace, as if she had been playing this music every day of her life. The guests could not believe what they were hearing. Dr. Peterson, who had never paid attention to Maria in 3 years, found himself leaning forward in his chair. His mouth was slightly open, and he had forgotten all about the wine glass in his hand. Mrs. Hamilton, who usually spent dinner parties talking about her shopping trips, was completely silent, her eyes fixed on Maria's hands. Bradley stood behind the piano, his face no longer showing the smirk he had worn when he brought Maria into the room. The joke he had planned was turning into something else entirely. He had expected to see Maria struggle with the piano, maybe press a few keys randomly, and make everyone laugh. Instead, he was watching a performance that would have impressed audiences at the finest concert halls. The music filled every corner of the room. The notes seemed to dance in the air, creating pictures and stories that each person could see in their own mind. Some guests were reminded of their childhood, others of lost loves or distant dreams. The melody was both sad and hopeful, telling a story without words. Maria's eyes were closed as she played, her body moving gently with the rhythm of the music. She was no longer thinking about the people watching her or the phones that might be recording. She was lost in the world of sound and emotion that only music could create. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, and her heart guided every note. The first piece ended, and for a moment there was complete silence. The guests were not sure if they should clap or if Maria was planning to play more. They were still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. This was not the embarrassing performance they had been expecting. This was art without pausing. Maria began another piece. This time it was Debussy's Clair de Lune, a gentle and dreamy composition that sounded like moonlight turned into music. Her touch on the keys was soft and delicate, creating sounds that seemed to float through the air like whispers. Mrs. Chun, the banker's wife, felt tears forming in her eyes. She had studied piano as a child but had never been able to play with such beauty and skill. Watching Maria play reminded her of how much she had loved music before life got busy with work and social obligations. Marcus, Bradley's best friend, slowly put his phone away. He had been ready to record Maria's failure and share it with his friends on social media, but now he felt ashamed of that plan. What he was witnessing was too beautiful and too personal to be turned into a joke. The music continued to flow from Maria's hands. She moved from Debussy to Bach, playing a piece that required incredible technical skill. Her fingers moved quickly and precisely, never missing a note. The guests began to realize that they were listening to someone who was not just talented, but truly gifted. Mr. Whitmore, who had been checking his phone during dinner, finally looked up and paid attention. He had always thought of Maria as a reliable employee, someone who did her job well and never caused problems. He had never imagined that she possessed such extraordinary talent. As Maria played, her mind traveled back to her childhood. She remembered her first piano teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had lived next door to her family. Mrs. Rodriguez had been a professional pianist before she retired, and she had seen something special in young Maria. She had taught her for free, spending hours every day helping her develop her skills. Maria remembered the small concerts she had given as a teenager, playing for her neighbors and friends. She remembered the pride in her parents' eyes when she won her first competition. She remembered the scholarship that had allowed her to study at the music conservatory, where she had learned to play the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. Most of all, she remembered the dream she had once had of becoming a concert pianist. She had wanted to travel the world, playing in famous concert halls and sharing her love of music with audiences everywhere. That dream had seemed so real and so possible when she was young, but life had other plans. Economic problems in her country had made it impossible for her to find work as a musician. She had gotten married and had children, and her family's survival had become more important than her artistic dreams. When they moved to America, she had to take whatever job she could find to help support her family. Now, as she played for these wealthy strangers, Maria felt all of those old dreams awakening in her heart. Her fingers remembered every piece she had ever learned, every technique she had ever mastered. The music poured out of her like water from a dam that had finally burst. The guests were completely transformed by what they were hearing. Amanda, who had suggested the cruel prank, now felt terrible about her earlier words. She was watching. Someone who was clearly a trained professional, someone who had dedicated years of her life to mastering this art. Sarah, Bradley's sister, moved closer to the piano to get a better view of Maria's hands. She had taken piano lessons as a child, but had never been very good at it. Watching Maria play made her realize how much skill and dedication it took to create such beautiful music. The room had become a concert hall, and Maria was the star performer. Every person in the room was completely focused on her, not because they wanted to laugh at her, but because they were witnessing something truly special. The woman they had ignored for 3 years was revealing herself to be an artist of extraordinary talent. As Maria transitioned into her final piece, a haunting melody that seemed to tell the story of her own life, she felt a sense of peace and completion. For the first time in years, she was not just a housekeeper or a mother or a wife. She was a musician, sharing her gift with the world, just as she had always dreamed of doing. The final note faded away slowly, leaving behind a silence that felt almost sacred. Maria kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, as if she was not ready to let go of the music that had carried her back to her true self. Then she slowly lifted her fingers and placed them in her lap, looking down at the piano keys that had just helped her tell her story. The silence in the room stretched on and on. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even seemed to breathe. The guests were all staring at Maria, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The woman they had thought they knew, the quiet housekeeper who cleaned their house twice a week, had just given them a performance that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Finally, Mrs. Hamilton began to clap. Her applause was slow and respectful, not the polite clapping that rich people usually gave at social events. This was the kind of applause that people gave to truly great artists, the kind that came from deep emotion and genuine appreciation. One by one, the other guests joined in. Dr. Peterson clapped with tears in his eyes. Mr. Chen applauded while shaking his head in amazement. Even the young people, who had been so ready to laugh at Maria just minutes before, were clapping with respect and admiration. The applause grew louder and stronger, filling the room with a sound that was completely different from the cruel laughter that had been there before. This was not the sound of people enjoying a joke at someone else's expense. This was the sound of people who had been moved and changed by something beautiful. Maria looked up at the faces around her and saw something she had never seen before. For the first time in 3 years, these people were really looking at her. Not looking through her or past her, but actually seeing her as a person. The invisible woman had become visible, and she was more remarkable than any of them had ever imagined. Mrs. Whitmore was the first to speak, her voice soft and full of wonder. "Maria," she said, "that was absolutely extraordinary. I had no idea. You could play like that? Where did you learn?" Maria felt her eyes filling with tears. She had kept her past hidden for so long, afraid that talking about her old life would make her current life seem even harder. But now, surrounded by people who had just heard her music, she felt ready to share her story. I studied piano at the National Conservatory in my home country, Maria said quietly. I was a piano teacher there for many years. I had my own music school with 30 students. The guests looked at each other in shock. They had never thought about Maria's life before. She came to work for the Whitmore family. They had assumed she had always been a housekeeper, that cleaning and cooking were the only skills she possessed. "But why are you working as a housekeeper?" asked Dr. Peterson. "With talent like that, you could be teaching piano here or even performing professionally." Maria smiled sadly. "When we first came to America, it was very difficult. My husband and I both needed to work immediately to support our children. I took the first job I could find, and then I kept working here because the Whitmore family was good to me. I never had time to think about music again." "You mean you haven't played piano in 3 years?" asked Mrs. Chun, unable to hide her amazement. "Sometimes I practice a little bit when I finish cleaning," Maria admitted. "When everyone is gone, I sit at the piano for a few minutes. I always clean the keys afterward so no one would know." The room fell silent again as the guests realized what this meant. Maria had been maintaining her incredible skill by practicing in secret, stealing moments with the piano when she thought no one was watching. The performance they had just witnessed was not something she had prepared for tonight. It was the result of years of hidden practice and a lifetime of dedication to music. Bradley, who had started this whole situation as a cruel joke, stepped forward. His face was red with embarrassment, and he could barely look at Maria. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I thought... I didn't know. I'm really sorry." Maria looked at him with kindness in her eyes. "It's okay, Mr. Bradley. How could you have known?" "I never told anyone about my music," but Bradley shook his head. "That's not an excuse. I should have treated you with respect regardless of what I knew about you. What I did tonight was wrong, and I'm ashamed of myself." The other guests began to speak up, all of them eager to learn more about Maria's background and her music. They asked about her favorite composers, her years of study, and her dreams for the future. For the first time ever, Maria found herself at the center of attention in a positive way. Mrs. Hamilton, who owned an art gallery, was the first to make an offer. "Maria, I organize cultural events for the city. I would love to have you perform at our next fundraiser. I know many people who would be thrilled to hear you play." Dr. Peterson, whose daughter had been struggling with piano lessons, immediately asked if Maria would consider teaching her. "I'll pay you whatever you think is fair," he said. "My daughter needs a teacher who really understands music the way you do." Mr. Chun, who knew many wealthy families in the city, offered to help Maria find other piano students. "There are so many children who need good music teachers," he said. "With your talent and experience, you could build a wonderful teaching practice." Mrs. Whitmore, who had been listening to all of these offers, finally spoke up. "Maria, I want to help you too. Starting tomorrow, I'm changing your schedule. You'll work fewer hours here, and I'm giving you a raise. You should have time to teach music again." Maria felt overwhelmed by all the kindness and support. After 3 years of being invisible, she was suddenly surrounded by people who wanted to help her return to the career she had loved. She thought about her children at home and how proud they would be to learn that their mother was not just a housekeeper, but also a talented musician. As the evening ended and the guests began to leave, each one stopped to shake Maria's hand and thank her for the beautiful music. They left the house changed, carrying with them a new understanding of the people they had taken for granted. Maria went home that night with hope in her heart for the first time in years. The woman who had entered the living room as the target of a cruel joke had left it as a respected artist, ready to reclaim the dreams she had thought were lost forever.